Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
If I were to ask you, how do you boost your practice's revenues by, 20% within 60 days? Could you lay it out for me step by step? Or how would you get 20 more new patients a month consistently within the next 3 months? Could you give me the action items involved in that? Now, your first thought might be, some people will say yes, or your first thought might be, well, not exactly, or I don't know, or whatever. Now, here's the funny thing about this. I guarantee you've run into numerous ideas over the course of your career that probably could accomplish some of what I was just, posing to you as questions. In other words, ideas that you've run into that could improve conditions in your practice. But right now, they're just ideas. They're probably sitting in books and binders and seminar packs and all types of different things that you have laying around from various CE that you've done over the years. The problem was you learned it, but it never actually became an actuality. It was never something that you actually implemented. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode, specifically implementation, real world steps that are involved with bringing about positive change in your practice. Your practice's statistics, in growth, whether that's revenue or production, and so on. I'm also going to give you a simple tool in this episode that you can start using immediately in your office to bring about an effective change in your practice's statistics. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And let's look at the basic problem with implementation. We learn something, we hear something, and it just does not happen. Let's say you get a referral program, and it gives you 10 different ways to get referrals. There's stuff like this all over the place. And you get it, and maybe you try it a little bit. You talk to your staff about doing this one thing, and they do it for 1 or 2 days, and then they stop doing it. It just does not happen. Or you might do this with your schedule, where you organize your schedule. I only want to do big procedures in the morning, and that works for a morning or two, and then you come in 3 or 4 days later, and your morning is completely non-productive. So, you do this, and maybe, another year goes by, you didn't quite get where you wanted to be, you get frustrated, maybe you decide that whatever you were trying to implement didn't work, or maybe even worse, you decide that you're just bad at these things, and you write it off there. That's just your lot in life. So what I wanted to share with you first is how we work with clients with relation to implementation. And I'm not doing this to promote our company. I'm doing it so you can sort of get an inside view to how this works, because we have a very effective program, but there's a very specific series of steps that we do to make sure that a client can actually implement what they're learning and improve conditions in their office. One of the problems we found early on is, we know a lot. And I'm not trying, this isn't hubris, but if you look at the combined level of experience in this company, here at MGE, you're looking at several hundred years of experience in the industry. We've had thousands of clients all over North America, primarily in the United States, but a large portion of the Canadian market. We have clients all over the world, in the EU, 49 US states, Central America, South America. We have clients all over the place. So a problem we found early on was, we know a lot. So I could sit down with you if you're a new client and you have a lot of training and education to get so that you really understand what it is that you're doing, but you want some immediate help. So I could sit down and give you 100 things you could do in your practice. And I probably wouldn't do 100, maybe 10 or 20 things to do in your practice. Say, good, go do these things this month. And start, changing things. And I give you this list, and I explain them to you, and I send you off. And this is something we found early on is you'll come back a month later. If you're the average doctor, you always have your occasional superstar, right? But this is the outlier. The average person is going to come back at the end of the month and go, yeah, we'll go over the list, and I'll say, how did you do this? No. Did you do this? No. What happened? Oh, I was so busy, etc. In other words, I gave you so many things to do, just nothing got done. I remember the first time I encountered this with a client. This was a long time ago. And I gave her a list of 12 things to do back in her practice, right? And this was, and I'm not criticizing the client. She was a very smart lady. She is a very smart lady. The problem was she had a lot going on in her office. So I give her these 12 things, and she's already overwhelmed. It was too much. So it was funny. We sat down at the end of the next month, and we looked, and she hadn't gotten anything done. And so what we did is we took a look at, okay, what's critical? What do we want to get done now? It was 3 things. So I sent her back the next month. She did those 3 things, and her stats went up. So what this told me, because we saw this a lot early on, not just me, but other people here, was you run into a few problems when you send somebody off to go do stuff in the practice. Number one, in a lot of cases, the doctor's already somewhat overwhelmed, right? So you give them a list of 10 other things to go implement. They're already overwhelmed. This just becomes another list of things to do. It's just more stuff to do, right? But then you drill down a little further. It goes back to the concept of understanding. All right. So what's the definition of understanding? It's to grasp the meaning of something or the significance, or it's really the meaning and significance of something. So if I understand something, I A, know what it means, and B, know its importance, and I can relate its importance to other things, all right? Relative importance. So let me explain. If you walk into an office, let's say you walk into an average dental practice and you're coming in as a consultant and you look at the front desk and the front desk person, there's a patient at the front who's just walked in, a new patient, and the phone is ringing and the front desk person is filing charts. Let's say they still have paper charts, so they're filing something. You know, it's CH goes before CI. Meanwhile, the phone's ringing and the patient's at the front sort of waiting around going, what would you think if you looked at that? You'd go, well, this person looks sort of silly, or the doctor needs to fire them. You might think any number of things. What you're actually looking at there is the person is handling importances sort of out of order, okay? So if I were to ask you to rank these three things, patient at the front, phone ringing, and filing charts by importances, how would you rank them? Most likely you'd say patient who's standing in the office is number one, phone ringing is number two, and filing charts is number three. Might even be a number 10, okay? But the most important things are the patient on the phone or whoever's calling on the phone and the person standing at the front desk. Those are the really important things. So if we go back to this concept of understanding, to grasp the meaning or significance of, what you could actually say about this front desk person is they had very poor understanding of their jobs. They could not rank what's important and what's unimportant, all right? So the problem, you know, in addition to overwhelm, is if I give you a list of 30 things to go do back in your office, is, you know, you're not steeped in practice management yet, because this happens with us with newer clients. They're not through all their training yet. They don't understand the whole subject of organization or statistic management or even case acceptance. We do 16 days of training just on case acceptance. All right. So what's going to happen is I give this list of 10 things, and because there's no education in that area yet, the person looks at the 10 things or 13 or 15 things, and all of them are the same as everything else. Like number one might be the most important thing this person has to do. This is going to be something that's critical, a deal breaker, something that's going to make or break their productivity this month. But this lack of understanding in their mind doesn't rank number one above everything else. It's of the same value as number two, number three, number five, etc. All right? So when you have this lack of understanding, a person has a difficult time isolating what's really, really important, okay? And you see this with your patients all the time. You're explaining a treatment plan and, you know, they need 3 root canals. They're going to be in it, or they have, you know, a couple of teeth that look like they're cracked and they need to get this fixed right away. But they're telling you how they need to buy, you know, a couple of new big screen TVs because their old ones, you know, just don't work as well with, you know, they're not smart TVs or something like this. You look at something like that and you might think, well, what is wrong with this person? Well, the person just doesn't understand. They don't realize that, you know, their health, their oral health and the function of their teeth is more important than, you know, making sure they have a smart TV, you know, in the long run. When they're laying up at night with a severe toothache or having to have that tooth extracted because it cracked or whatever, they're going to realize the importance. But right now they don't get it. All right. So those are the two primary barriers usually to implementation. Is one is overwhelm and the other is lack of understanding. Being unable to prioritize is probably a good way of saying it. So let's take, for example, let's say you had a referral program. Now, what do I mean by referral program? I mean a series of steps that will get more new patient referrals. Let's say there's like 3 or 4 different things that you're supposed to be doing and you want to implement this with your team, right? Okay, we want to ask every new patient who calls in if there's anyone else in the household who needs a dentist, because we'll schedule more than one person per new patient call. We're going to check the charts and check with every patient of record when they come in if there's anybody in their family, any other family members that aren't patients in the office, so we can get them in as patients as well, because those are two low-cost things that we can get, immediate new patients. We're also going to print up, cards, referral cards that we can give out to patients and to our staff to hand out in the community to get people to come in. I mean, there's a number of different things, right? But let's say that we have those three things. So you talk to your staff about this and you go, okay, here's what I want to do. Every new patient that calls in, we're going to do this. And every patient of record, we need to check with them. Maybe you don't assign who's responsible for doing it, which is a whole other thing. Obviously, if you want something done, someone has to be accountable for it. And you go, number three, we're printing these cards, and you tell the hygienist, I want this given out to every patient who you see in your chair, and to your assistant, I want this given out to every patient that I treat. Okay. So come Monday, you start checking to see if people are really doing this. And usually the way these things go is they start off pretty good. People try to do it. Then you don't check on it on Tuesday. Then maybe you check on it on Wednesday. And by the next week, everybody's forgotten about it. Okay, so there were a couple problems there. Number one, these folks already have a job. There's something that they're already doing, and you're introducing a change. All right. So when you're introducing a change, obviously the person has to be on board with the change. But then, especially if it's something a lot different than what they're doing, you're expecting me at the end of every procedure to do something specific with a patient. That's something that you have to constantly, ask about or check on or, push regularly until I've done it so much that it becomes, a habit. There's this idea that it takes 21 days to form a habit. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that if you do something regularly, then eventually people come to expect to do it or that they have to do it. So number one, you'd want to check on this thing regularly. Number two, you might want to introduce one piece at a time. You might say, okay, here's what we're going to do for our referral program. There's these three things that I eventually want to implement, but here's what we're going to implement this week. This is the watchword for this week. Every new patient call we get when we're scheduling that new patient, we ask them, hey, is there anybody else in your household that needs a dentist? Because they can do this new patient special too, if it's a new patient special they called off of or whatever. We're going to ask every single new patient. And then, at the end of day one, you check. At the end of day two, you check. At the end of day three, you check. After a couple weeks, that's just something that becomes, par for the course. Folks are just used to doing that. Every new patient call I get, okay, good. Hey, just by the way, is there anybody else in your home that needs a dentist? Yeah, as a matter of fact, my wife needs one. Okay, good. Well, your wife can also get this new patient special. Do we want to go ahead and schedule her an appointment? You implement that one thing, and then a couple things happen at that point. You've implemented that one thing. It becomes regular, and then you start to see results from it. Now, this is very important. We could call those results a win. You had a win, all right? Wins lead to more wins. So, sort of in a bigger picture, let's say you were convinced you could never really consistently collect over $80,000 a month. Then you learn a few things and you get collections up to $120,000. Then they're $120,000 the next month. Then they're $120,000 the next month. Well, 4 months ago, you thought you would never beat 80. You're never going to beat 80. It's just impossible. But now you're doing 120. 120 becomes the new level of expectancy. So if I were to tell you, well, next month, why don't you try to beat 80? Well, of course you're going to beat 80. Are you used to doing 120? You could kind of apply this to anywhere in life. If someone's dieting, right, and they have had trouble with diets, and then they get on a diet, it's really working, and they're losing weight, they're feeling good, you start to build up a bit of a head of steam. It's sort of like a snowball rolling down a hill. It becomes easier and easier and easier because you've got that inertia going, right? So wins lead to more wins, and your staff are not stupid, okay? If you give them something to do and it's not producing any result, you tell me to do this with every phone call that comes in, and either A, I'm not doing it, or B, I'm doing it wrong and it's not being effective, I'm not going to want to continue to do it. Okay. Whereas on the other side, if you have me do this and maybe you role play it with me a bit, because that's the other thing I would do if I were implementing a 3-pronged referral program and the first step was asking every new patient if there's anybody else in their household, I'd role play that a bit until my team was completely confident doing it. So then they do it a few times, and then you know what I'm going to hear? My receptionist is going to come by when we're at lunch and say, you know what, by the way, I scheduled 4 additional new patients doing that this week. Wow. Well, considering I was spending $200-300 a new patient, they just saved me $800, maybe more. You might even want to create some type of an incentive game with this because that's a lot cheaper than I'm going to spend on pay-per-click or a postcard. You see, so wins, and then it becomes a regular thing. And then after they look at the end of the month and they go, oh my gosh, we scheduled an additional 22 new patients just doing this one thing. So then when you come with thing number 2, all right, we're going to ask every patient coming in, people are ready to jump on board because thing number 1 worked out really well. So wins lead to more wins. So you eliminate that overwhelm because we're doing one thing. And number 2, you implemented it and you continued to check on it being implemented and it got a result. So now everybody's excited about it because they're, having wins. So let me relate this back to, our approach, right? So we have the MGE Power Program is 78 days of training. It's 600 hours of training, all right? It's usually done over the course of a year and a half. Very effective. We have the metrics on our website, but they're pretty much unparalleled in the industry for consistent growth. But okay, that was my little mini commercial. But here's the point. So I'm talking to a brand new MGE Power client, let's say, and a Power client at first is going to learn all about marketing and sales. That's the primary area we're going to focus on from an education perspective because then they can control income. Then we're going to get into organization. Then we're going to polish it off with executive skills. And all of this is their office manager is being trained on the same things at the same time. All right? Hopefully at the same time. But they'll be trained on the same things even if the office manager starts later. But they're not going to learn in their education about, let's say, hiring or personnel or something like this for, 4 months. So let's say this is a new client and I'm talking to them and they're having all kinds of staff problems. I don't just leave them blowing in the wind. I have to give them things to do to start resolving that now, but they're not educated on the subject yet. So you see, I have a problem. This is where I have to be very specific and exact. One of the things we did, just as an aside, we on our online platform, DDS Success, Sabri, who you've heard on other episodes, and I recorded what we call our jump start. It's about 3.5 to 4 hours of video where we actually basically just rattle off everything Sabri does with a new client. Since Sabri is our primary, our senior technical person and has trained our whole tech team, or delivery team rather. And she goes over all the things she goes over with a new client because a lot of these things the client is not going to be encountering from an educational perspective till later. And we apply that concept plus the fact that we're not going to give them too many things to do off the bat because we want that. I guess what we're looking for with a new person to get something going is, let's say where they're at is a 1, but they want to get to 10. I'm just thinking of some abstract way of representing this. Well, I'm not going to bring them to 10 from 1 with just a meeting or having them watch some video courses. If I can get them to a 2 or 3, in other words, achieve some improvement, that's a win. They'll be at a 10 when they finish the program. You see? So we want to start simply. We're looking for improvement. We're not looking for a permanent handling for everything yet. We're looking for things to change or improve. So like that example with the referral program. Yeah, you should have all 3 things in. This is part of the problem is a lot of doctors are overachievers. They're very exacting. They're perfectionists. So when they get a 3-prong referral program, this all needs to be in now. They get angry when it's not. No, you're looking to start improving the situation. So if you can start getting some more referrals with phone calls coming in from new patients, that's a win. So you start simple and you make sure people are actually doing it before you throw 5 other things at them, okay? So let's take this over to the subject of management, for example. How should the day-to-day to week-to-week management of your practice look? Well, I'm going to throw some stuff out at you. Ideally, you're starting off the morning with a meeting where you are going over your statistics with your office manager and your key personnel. Then you're doing a morning production meeting where you're reviewing every patient coming in that day. I did an episode about this. Then you're maybe breaking this down into a technical meeting where you're meeting with your assistants to go over the procedures that you're doing that day and any particulars that you want to cover. And you do that, and your office manager is managing throughout the day. Then you're meeting with your office manager maybe briefly every day. Then once a week, you're having a management meeting. And then you're doing your financial planning, and you're having a staff meeting. It's a lot. Okay? It's a lot. Now, do we have clients who do this? Absolutely. And there's a lot more to it than that. All right? We're not going to there's no point in bringing it up. But it's a lot to do. So let's say, you're listening to this and maybe you've never done a service with us or you've just been a listener to the podcast and you want to start improving situations in your practice today. Well, I could give you a handout explaining all of these things. I could spend time explaining it all to you. And you might get half of it in and half of it not. And it gets a bit lunky. Right? You're having trouble. Oh, I only did 2 of these things. And then you're mad at yourself because you didn't do the other 3 or whatever. No, and you're already overwhelmed. You're already having trouble finding personnel, or the personnel you have you're not completely happy with. It just becomes a bit of a mess. So what would I do with somebody in your situation who, let's say you want to improve your practice, you want to start growing? All right. Well, the first question I'd probably ask you is, do you set monthly goals for your practice in various areas? Do you track any metrics at all? Or do you just look at your production or collections at the end of every month sometimes? I'd ask you some simple stuff. And then I'd probably give you, and I have a download of this, something we call our daily practice analysis form. Now, what is this form? It's on the episode webpage. You can download it. This is just a form which explains every day where your practice is at and where your metrics are at on a week-to-date and a month-to-date basis. Now, why do we say week-to-date and month-to-date? Well, if you think about it, if you're trying to handle a big thing, how would you handle something big? You usually try to handle it in bite-sized pieces, not to, I know that's a dental podcast, kind of funny, right? But it's actually not that funny, but it was just, well, I guess, whatever. Anyway, but you try to handle it in bite-sized pieces. So if I want to collect, let's say, or produce 150,000 this month, well, what would I do? I'd probably look at, okay, what would that work out to every day? Well, I'd need to average about 10,000 a day, but some days are half days, some days are longer than others, so maybe it won't work out that way, but on average, I need to be averaging about 10,000 a day. Okay, and let's say I work Monday through Thursday, and, I'm working 15 days this month. I wanted to have a round number because I said 150 was the goal, right? All right, so I need 10,000 a day. I'm working 15 days this month, and I have 4 weeks, all right, of about 3 to 4 days each week. All right, so then I would be first looking at, I have my monthly goal, but then I would be looking at what am I doing every week, and then I would be looking at what am I doing every day. Now, why are we doing that? Well, and this is what happens. So you'll have somebody who wants to collect 150 or produce 150, and they make that. A lot of people don't even make the decision. They don't even make the goal. But let's say you have somebody who goes, I want to, collect 150 this month. Well, then, that's great. So then you're sort of plugging along for the month and you get busy because an office is a busy place. You have a lot going on. It's not like you were idle to begin with. And then, the 16th rolls around or the 20th rolls around and you happen to get around to asking your office manager, how are we doing this month? Well, doctor, we're at 30. All right, well, you had a goal of 150. You're at 30. And it's the 16th or 20th of the month. You are way off target. You're in trouble if you want to do 150 this month. You're in big trouble. But had you been looking on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, the 7th, and you would have realized that things weren't going well back then, which then gives you more time to avert a bad month. Not to give a bad example, but if you're sailing a ship into it, you're going to hit a reef. The further away from the reef that you are that you can correct your course, the better chance you have of avoiding the reef. All right? You have a better chance of avoiding disaster the more time that you have. Ask your scheduler. Would they rather have an opening today or next Thursday? They got plenty of time to fill next Thursday's opening. Today they don't. The more time you have, the more chance you have to avert problems. So if you're looking at these things on a daily basis and a weekly basis, you have a much better chance of fixing a situation before it becomes a problem. So this is why we have this form. And I'll just go through a couple points on it. First off, how do we use this form? Well, this would be filled out by your office manager or whoever has access to the computer. It might be your scheduler or your financial coordinator. And it's turned into the doc and the office manager every morning. It should actually be done the night before. So when you walk in on Wednesday morning, it should have been filled out Tuesday night. What does this form tell me? It tells me 3 things. 1, what's happening today? And, you most likely, I don't know what percentage of doctors use analytics software at this point. I know quite a few do. You most likely would be able to get a lot of this data from your analytics software, which begs the question, well, why not just use your analytics software? Well, I agree. But let me ask you a question. If you have analytics software, I'm talking to the people who have it, do you look at this every day? I've asked people this, and I would say about 20% or less of the people who actually pay for analytics software actually use it the way it's supposed to be used. Because those analytics softwares are great, and they give you metrics you're not going to care about. What did that temp hygienist produce per hour last year? Whatever, right? But they give you all the data you want. A lot of them do, but people don't look at them, is where it becomes problematic. Here at MGE, we have in our client services area, we have boards on the wall. They're actually screens that display what's in the computer, right? And they display various forms from the software that we use. And they're, who's registered for a seminar, who's scheduled, which clients are arriving this week. And why do we have this up on screens? We paid for a bunch of screens and hung them. I mean, it looks kind of cool and high tech, but why do we do that? Because then it's always in your face all the time. The problem with analytics software, the software is great. It's just, do you open it and look at it? It's in a computer. If that was on your wall and you're walking by it every day, specific metrics, I guarantee you'd be looking at it every day. So yeah, maybe you could take this daily practice analysis and configure a report in your analytics software to spit it out to you every day, in which case, great, do that. I just did this. We've used this for quite some time. We do it as a form just because then I know for sure the doctor is going to be looking at this and only this every day because it's sitting in the middle of the doctor's desk first thing in the morning. If you can get your software to display it, great. By all means, do it. Save a piece of paper. But, the idea is that you're looking at this stuff every day. So what am I looking at on here? Got 3 points. One is today. So what does it tell me? What's the number of patients that are scheduled today? For me, I have Dr. 1, Dr. 2, and then office total on here. There's 3 columns. So for Dr. 1, Dr. 2, and the office total, what's the scheduled production for Dr. 1, Dr. 2, and the office total? What are the hours today? This time to this time. What's the projected production for each of these, for the 2 doctor providers and the rest of the office this week? And what's the projected production next week? So I'm looking right there and I'm going, okay, I'm going to be seeing X amount of patients today. I'm scheduled to produce Y. My hours are from this to this, which you probably already know, but it's good to know when is your associate there. You might forget they leave early today. And what am I projected to produce this week? And what am I projected to produce next week? So, let's say you've set a goal, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But let's say you set a goal where what was figured out is you have to produce 15,000 a week for the office to make its goal. And you see that your projected production for next week is 6. All right, well, you have some work to do to build up next week. And let's say you're getting this report on Tuesday. Tuesday of the week, you get this report. So Monday's already happened. You get this Tuesday morning, and it tells you that next week you have $6,000 on your schedule. Well, you now have it in your mind. You need to find, that you're going to be seeing patients who need treatment. You need to close some of these cases to fill up next week. It's already in your mind. It's embedded in your mind. Okay, then the next section is unfilled schedule. Like I said, you can probably pull this from either your software or your analytics software. And then we have what's unfilled today, tomorrow, and the remainder of the week, and that's for Dr. 1, Dr. 2, and, the office as a whole. Okay? Then we get to what we call actuals and progress. This is how we're doing towards our goals, all right? And we have a few key metrics here, because you remember I mentioned earlier, part of understanding is being able to determine the significance of something. So we put some very important metrics on here that you should be looking at regularly. What are they? Week-to-date production and month-to-date production. Week-to-date collections, month-to-date collections. Week-to-date new patients, month-to-date new patients. Week-to-date amount treatment planned, month-to-date amount treatment planned. I've been asked about that before, and I'll just throw this out here. You can, when you're managing, you can sort of break, if you understand the cycle of how something is produced, right? And you can figure out all the steps involved, then you can kind of think, you can think the whole process through and actually take action to improve the end result. Let me give you an example. Let's say you find that if you send out, for every 10,000 postcards you send out, you get 50 new patients. You go, well, okay, I'd like to get 50 more new patients a month. You go, come on, I'll send out 20,000 postcards. See, that's something very easy to control, how many postcards I'm sending out, because if those metrics hold true and I'm getting 50 off of 10,000, I should be able to get 100 off of 20,000, right? So the same thing applies to various areas of the office. If you think with production, where does production come from? Number one, you need a patient who needs treatment, whether it's a patient of record or a new patient. That patient needs to have that treatment presented. They have to accept it. They have to make financial arrangements and pay for it. And then they have to get scheduled onto your schedule, right? I talked about this a lot in the whole case presentation and acceptance process a few weeks ago. But part of that is you actually need people who need treatment. So that doesn't mean you invent treatment, obviously. That would be unethical. You're looking for, but you are keeping track of how much treatment have you treatment planned this week. Okay, because if, let's say you could even build up some metrics on this. You'll find, as an example, you might close 1/3 of what you treatment plan. Like if you were to run your metrics backwards, you go, okay, over the course of the last 3 months, I treatment planned $300,000 and I closed, meaning the patient accepted 100 of it. And maybe that number holds true. You could easily calculate this number. Well, then you know if I want to close 100,000 in treatment and produce $100,000, I need to present 300,000 or diagnose and present 300,000. So it's not like you're going to find more treatment that you weren't thinking of, but it does tell you if there's a possible problem coming down the road, right? If I look and I go, okay, I close a third of what I treatment plan, and that means if I want to do 25,000 a week, I have to treatment plan 75,000, and I look and I go, wait a minute, it's Thursday and I've only treatment planned 10,000 this week. So then I might look at, well, what's going on? Maybe there's been openings in hygiene. I'm not seeing enough patients, or our new patients have dropped. Do you follow? It's just something to be aware of. The next metrics are consultations, meaning treatment presentations. Talked about this at length in other episodes. That's something I'm going to want to monitor, because if you have consultations, even if you're not a great salesperson, you are going to get closes. So then, by that same logic, if I want to have more closes, I need more consultations, whether that's patients of record or new patients. You might have your treatment coordinator following up on, the incomplete treatment list. We've talked about this before, how it's not the most fruitful source of filling last-minute openings on the schedule. Well, your treatment coordinator might be calling some of these folks back in that maybe you didn't have time to properly present to represent the treatment plan and close it. So consultation is one metric we're looking at. The last metric I've talked about in a couple other episodes is number of recall patients. That is your growth statistic. Number of recall patients, and this is week to date, month to date. All these numbers are week to date, month to date. Number of recall patients is a growth metric for your practice. In a nutshell, why? Because a practice that's getting 20 to 25 new patients a month should be adding 1 day of hygiene per week per year. So if I have 4 days of hygiene per week this year, if I'm getting 25 new patients a month, next year I should have 5. The following year I should have 6. If I'm still at 4 next year and 4 the year after, that means that my retention is terrible. I'm losing patients. I'm going crazy driving all these patients into the practice, and I'm not keeping them. So number of recall patients tells me recall, not hygiene. Very clear differentiation. Hygiene could be, SRP, scaling route plannings, or maybe your hygienist sees new patients too, new patient initials, right? Obviously you're doing the initial, but they're seeing the new patient. So I would not count that number in this metric. I'm looking for how many recall patients I have, because it tells me how many people are coming back, and is my practice growing, right? So, there's a number of things on here. It probably would take whomever you're having fill this out, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes a day. But then you walk in the morning and you know a few things just, the second you look at it. You get familiarized with your day. Okay, good. This is how much I'm producing. This is what I'm working. Wow, next week production looks pretty low. Okay, and we have a good amount of unfilled time. You might even ask, where are my openings the rest of the week? Okay, cool. Then you look at where you're at for the month on production, consultations, treatment plans, etc. Then you're already thinking with this. So let's say you find that you, and this is another important point I have to cover, but you set a goal for your practice, again, let's say for 150, and the way things are shaking out, you're really only on target to do about 100. Well, then you're thinking with this, and you're letting the rest of the team think with this. Hey, guys, we got to do another 50 somehow, so let's keep an eye out. If we have any patients that, make sure I have enough time to present the treatment to them. We might need to bring them back if we don't have time to make sure that I can actually do it. Let's make sure we fill this opening on this date. Like, everybody's being aware of it. There's two other things here. The other thing that's on this under the actuals in progress section 3, is goal. You should be setting kind of, I can't believe I didn't mention this, but the first thing you should be doing is setting a goal for the month. I talked about it a little bit earlier in the episode here, but you have to know what your goal is for the month. If you don't have a goal, that's sort of like going on a vacation with no destination. Like, I'm just going to get in the car and start driving around, right? You have to have, where are we going? Because that's what you're relating all of this to. And then you would break that goal down weeks, by day, by week, and you obviously are making it for the month. I wanted to mention that. But the thing with statistics that's funny, this is just something that I found over the years, is usually the first thing is you have to be aware of them. When people have stat problems where they're not growing, or they number one, they're probably not looking at them. Either A, they're not compiling them at all, which your computer does this now, but B, you're not looking. Like, are you at the end of every day looking at the day sheet to see what you produced and collected? And do you know where you are at month to date? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. So it first starts with an awareness, and you can, sort of export this to the rest of your team. Let's say, for example, you've given your schedule coordinator the statistic of office production. Well, do they know what the office production is today, tomorrow, for the month? Are they keeping it on a graph? Funny thing is I'll put a graph for somebody in their workstation, and if the graph's going down, they hate that. So they'll work to get the graph going up. It's almost like, it's not magical, but it's a silly thing in a way that the fact that they have a graph and the graph's in front of their face all day, they want to see it going up, right? So knowing and keeping a statistic is, number one, a big important thing. But number two is paying attention to them. And that's why I like this form, whether you're doing it on a computer, whether you're getting it filled out and handed to you every morning, it makes you aware of what's happening in your practice every day, because then you can take action before you run into a problem, or you can take action to make sure that you pull off a great month. And this is a nice little, stepping stone to implementing a full management system. This at least is something simple to where you can start achieving a level of awareness as to what's happening. And like I said, we're not trying to go from 1 to 10 overnight. Maybe this brings you to a 2 or 3. You see a little bit of a bump in productivity because you're aware of what's going on. Well, that's an improvement. Give yourself a pat on the back, and then you can build from there, because remember, wins lead to more wins. So just to leave you with, what are the keys here? If you're trying to implement something, pick one thing, the most important thing or an important thing, and work on that and check on that and push that until it is really in. It becomes part of the process, right? Then, and it's working and people are having wins with it, then move on to the next one. Things continue to improve. And remember, you're going to have some losses as you go through this, right? Maybe things don't work out the way that you want. Well, you forget about those and you move on. You keep focusing on what's actually making you win. And before you know it, if you pick 10 things and you started with one, all 10 are in place. All right. That's, I guess, if you were to take anything from this, that basic thing, start simple. But when you put something in, really get it in, get it functioning. Don't try to do 20 things at once. And this is sort of like a saying I've had for myself for years, which is I'd rather do 3 things really well than, I can't use the exact language I use when I say this, but than to do 10 things, half good, right? I'd rather do 3 things really good than 10 things that I'm really not doing any of well. I hope this helps. I hope it didn't take too long. I think I busted the 30-minute barrier, which has been happening. I'm going to have to change it to 45 minutes or less, I guess. And if you'd like to learn more, I mentioned you have the download of this practice analysis form. Do download it if you can. It's on the episode webpage. If you want to find out more about, I mentioned to you that Jumpstart on DDS Success. This is what we go over with a new client for immediate implementation steps. You can find that out by going to ddssuccess.com. You can get a demo. And if you want to find out more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us. We have a feedback button on the podcast website. You can also email me at jeffb@mgeonline.com. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.